Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've closed the doors. So just before we get started, there is an emergency exit at the back. So just up the stairs and out the back, that'll take you outside. And if you go down the hallway back to where you came from, there are 2 bathrooms at the corner. So just so you guys know. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's candidate debate hosted by the Truro and Colchester Chamber of Commerce. I'm Lexi, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. We're very glad that you could join us and for this important opportunity to hear directly from the candidates seeking to represent our community. Tonight, we're joined by our candidates, which I will introduce in order of what they had drawn. So we have from the Conservative Party of Canada, Dr. Stephen Ellis, from the New Democratic Party, Larry Duchesne, from the Liberal Party of Canada, Alana Hirtle, and from the Green Party of Canada, Kellyanne Callaghan. So I would like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. The territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq peoples first signed when the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We recognize that we are all treaty people and have responsibilities to each other and this land. We also acknowledge the people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years, and we honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of African descent who came before us to this land. A little bit about the Chamber of Commerce. We are the collective voice of the business community. We actively engage with members to address their needs for business growth and prosperity, serving over 500 members in our region. Hosting this debate is a part of our commitment to fostering civic engagement and ensuring our members and the broader community are informed and empowered. We'd also like to give a special thank you to our sponsor, the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, for their generous support, which makes events like this possible. And we're grateful for their commitment to continue to inform and engage communities. We'd also like to thank NSCC for the use of their time, space, and equipment, as well as CBC for attending the event. Please note that tonight's debate is being recorded and will be shared after the event through the Chamber's social media, as well as our email newsletter. While we are not live streaming the event, we want to ensure that all members of our community have access to what's being shared this evening. So we obviously have our candidates here. There was some criteria that had to be met. That criteria is that the candidate's party currently holds at least 1 elected member of parliament, and that the party intends to run candidates in at least 90% of ridings across Canada. So ahead of starting, there are just some housekeeping rules, and just for some fairness to make sure everything stays respected and balanced. All candidates have been provided with the same information in advance. Each candidate has received water, equal seating, and preparation time. A timer has been set up for all candidates to see how much time is remaining in the response, which is located right up to their left. At the end of the candidate's time, a bell will be rung. That means that it's the end, their microphone will be cut off, and I will start talking over them. We ask that there be no interruptions or audience participation during the event. Please hold applause or reactions until the end. There will be no opportunities during the debate for the public to ask candidates a question. We do also want to add, if there is any major disruptions, there is security on site. So we invited members of the public to submit questions in advance of the debate. We received a large number of submissions, over 40, which is incredible. And to ensure a focused and relevant discussion, we have selected questions based on the most popular and pressing themes. If your question is not asked, or if you're looking for more information regarding any of the candidates' policies, we recommend that you contact their offices directly. So tonight's format, we'll be starting with opening statements, which each candidate will have 3 minutes for their statement. Then we will be asking the moderated questions. We'll ask the question, candidates will receive 2 minutes to answer the question, as well as provide the rebuttal within that 2 minutes. And then we will rotate the order of who's being asked that question. So our first would be Dr. Stephen Ellis, for the first question, and then everyone moving down the table. And then the second question, we'll start with Larry Duchesne, and that's how the questions will be asked. Then we'll have our closing statements, which each candidate will have 3 minutes for their statements and no further questions from the audience. The initial speaking order was drawn before the event by the candidates. They chose number 1 to 4, and that's how we decided the event. So we're going to start with our opening statements. So we will have Dr. Stephen Ellis start with his.
Good evening, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. C'est un plaisir d'être ici comme le candidat du Parti conservateur pour l'élection générale du Canada 2025. People often wonder why someone might put their name on a ballot and do things like this. You know, my team and I have had the opportunity to knock on thousands of doors across this great riding of Cumberland-Colchester. And the biggest thing that we found that concerns us is that the promise to Canadians has been broken. And I was the recipient of said promise that if you come to this country and you work hard, you'll be able to get a great job, live in a house you can afford, put food on your table, and live in a safe neighborhood. And I can tell you very clearly that that is a promise that I aim to defend. You know, back growing up in a very big town called Lincoln, New Brunswick, for the first 18 years of my life, and my mom still lives there at age 91, all by herself. You know, my parents taught me the value of service, and they were great supporters of minor hockey and Boy Scouts. And I continued that tradition as I went off to university. Before I met my wife, Deborah, who's here this evening, I had the opportunity to continue to participate in those types of activities. I then went on to join the Royal Canadian Air Force as a flight surgeon and had the great pleasure to serve across this country, literally coast to coast to coast, and to be deployed overseas. And you begin to understand how important it is to be a Canadian, how important it is to serve our country. I had the opportunity then to return here to Truro in 1999 and practice family medicine for the ensuing 22 years before I was elected in 2021. It's very important, though, that we have folks who want to build community. You know, as I mentioned, things like Boy Scouts, things like minor hockey. I had the opportunity to have a program called Walk with a Dog, which people often thought was walk with your dog, but it's a real story. You know, the other thing is giving back to communities that are greater than ours. We've had a project that we've been involved with called the Guatemala Outreach Project, bringing service to those people who desperately need it in the country of Guatemala. More and more across the country, we also understand that we need to have leadership. We need to have folks who inspire others, who will do things, who will stretch beyond their limits, that will give folks the ideas so that people don't want handouts, they want a hand up. And that's incredibly important to me. So as we go forward this evening, hopefully this will be an opportunity for all of you to understand my character, my reasons for doing this. And certainly I look forward to the debate as we go forward and to hear the answers from my colleagues here at the table. So thank you all for being here. It's incredibly important. This will be a consequential election. And for all of you out there, make sure you mark your X. Thank you.
So next we'll have Larry Duchesne.
Yeah, I'm proud to represent the New Democratic Party in this election. I live in River Phillip. I've lived there for about 15 years. I'm a member, or I volunteer for the Oxford Food Bank. I'm a retired teacher. I'm also a member of Don't Spray Cumberland County, which is an organization opposed to the aerial spraying of glyphosate on our forest land. We are in a climate crisis, but the liberals and conservatives are not talking about it enough in this election. The Liberals, under their new leader, have become more conservative. They talk about building pipelines, and they canceled the consumer carbon tax. If we build pipelines, we're making a commitment to burning fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. Now, the Conservatives are talking about canceling the carbon tax on industry. So much for the idea that the polluters should pay. And as far as the conservatives go on the environment, I think their leader, Polyev, needs crash course in environmental studies and what is climate change, and I doubt that they really believe it's true. The NDP in this election, Jagmeet's been talking about eliminating the subsidies to oil and gas companies. That's something that should have been done a long time ago. He's also talking about a national home retrofit program, which would be available to 3 million families, giving lower and mid-income families, access to free heat pumps, home insulation, and other benefits. We need the NDP. The NDP under Jagmeet has brought us a lot. He's brought us Dedicare, Pharmacare. Et quand vous votez, je demande que vous votez de la cœur, pas de la peur de Poliev or de la peur de Trump. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. For those who don't know me, my name is Alana. I grew up in rural Lunenburg County, a place not unlike Portapique or Pugwash, which is why it's felt so familiar for me to settle here. I've lived in Truro for 12 years, and this region of rural Nova Scotia has become my home. I've spent the past decade alongside small business owners in Colchester County through my work with the Community Business Development Corporation, CBDC Noble. I've worked with hundreds of local entrepreneurs and provided business skills training for more than 2,000 people. I've fostered more than 200 loans, which invested more than $7.5 million into small businesses in Colchester County, creating more than 500 jobs right here in our local communities. For most of the past 5 years, I've been part of the Portapique Community Build-Up Project, working with the community around their desire to respond to tragedy by rebuilding the community center and a natural playground. I became the public liaison for that project, fundraising and organizing, contributions totaling almost $1.5 million. The playground opened in 2021, and the community center officially opened in June 2024. I have a proven track record of getting things done. When I put my mind to a task, I don't mess around. I was inspired by Mark Carney when he tossed his hat in the Liberal leadership ring because his life experience is exactly what we need in this moment. His professional hand on the rudder steered us through the 2008 recession, and he brings the real-world expert experience Canada needs to face our current challenges. What I bring is real-world, in-the-trenches business experience, a track record of successful community development, an ability to build teams, and a voice that will not shrink away in Ottawa. Politics was never my grand plan, but I'm here tonight asking for your vote because I simply could not stand on the sidelines in this election. The contrasting visions for Canada are clear. One party can't stop talking about how broken we are and insisting every solution can be distilled down to a 3-word catchphrase. Mark Carney brings vast experience from both public sector service and private sector success. He's willing to confront big problems with complex solutions, even if it won't fit onto a bumper sticker. Mark Carney knows we're not going to simply cut our way to the strongest economy in the G7. Mark Carney is building a team I would be proud to join, a team rooted in real-world experience, a team committed to investing in people. Please send me to Ottawa to represent you on that team. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Callaghan.
Good evening. My name's Callaghan, and I'm running to be your next Member of Parliament in Cumberland, Colchester. Thank you to the Truro and Colchester Chamber of Commerce for hosting our debate today. I'm here tonight because I know what it feels like to stretch a dollar until it breaks. I know what it's like to worry about rent. Sorry. Food, and whether your kids will have a better shot than you do. And I know I'm not the only one. Canadians are working harder than ever and getting less. Meanwhile, the Liberals and the Conservatives keep pointing fingers, but neither of them have delivered real relief. Grocery bills are up, housing's out of reach, wages are stuck, and every year more families are falling through the cracks. You deserve better than this endless tug-of-war between two parties that protect the same broken system. I'm running with the Green Party because it's time for a new voice, a voice that puts people before profits, that prioritizes affordable living over political gains, and that actually listens to communities like ours. Our plan puts affordability front and center. Build affordable homes and end corporate hoarding of housing. Bring down grocery costs by supporting local farmers and breaking up food monopolies. Invest in energy-efficient homes to cut your bills and your emissions. And yes, we'll make the big polluters and the billion-dollar corporations finally pay their fair share. This isn't about an ideology, it's about an actual common sense. It's about making life livable again. It's about sending someone to Ottawa who will play the same old game. Cumberland and Colchester deserve a fighter, a listener, and a builder. That's who I am, and that's the kind of MP I'll be.
So now we'll be moving on to the question portion of our evening. So following the order that was drawn, we will be starting with Dr. Stephen Ellis answering first before moving on down the table. So the first question of the night is, there have been mixed signals on health of the Canadian economy. What is your party's mandate to help small business owners and entrepreneurs grow their brands given the threat of U.S. tariffs and uncertain economic times?
Thank you very much, Lexi. You know, one of the things, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that's incredibly important is to defend the Canadian way of life. And, certainly I've had the opportunity to sign my name on the dotted line twice, once serving our country in the Air Force and second serving as a member of Parliament here for the last 3.5 years. Perhaps the most important thing that we know is that the interprovincial trade barriers that currently exist inside our country are causing us harm. We know that from an economist from out west named Trevor Toom, I've had the opportunity to speak to on many occasions, that we could improve our economy by over 7.9% to the tune of $200 billion per year by removing the trade barriers that exist on an interprovincial basis. The other things that are incredibly important, as you begin to talk to farmers who are also small businesses, I had the opportunity to meet with a group of farmers from Cumberland this one evening this week. And what we also know is that the regulatory burden that exists for small businesses in this country is paralyzing them. You can imagine going out and working in your field or working with your animals for 10 or 12 hours a day and then having to come back and file your HST and worry about having a bookkeeper and filing taxes, et cetera, et cetera. This creates a significant problem. The other difficulty in terms of small business mobility that we see is highlighted inside of healthcare as well. We know that physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and other healthcare providers have been crying for national licensure inside this country for years. And sadly, there has been no action taken to rectify that situation. And we know, because of the meetings that I've had with my office over the last 2 years as a health critic, that this is something that's easily changeable and will make life more affordable for Canadians and make them actually have access to healthcare, which they don't.
Next, we'll hear from Larry Duchesne.
When the NDP has talked about economic development, small business has always been an important part of the plan. Small business, public business, and cooperatives. And in recent elections, the NDP has often proposed reducing the tax on small business. We see small business as something completely different from dealing with corporations. They both go by name company, but there's big company and little company. We like small business and we'll promote small business at every opportunity.
Now we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
Thank you. You know, in these last weeks, as I've been listening to the news, I've been so proud of Prime Minister Mark Carney for how he is handling this trade and tariff situation. 35 states in the US have Canada as their number one client, and if we need to, we can make that very painful for them. Locally, I think about, workers in Debert and throughout the riding who are worried about their jobs and how this impact is going to, or how it's going to impact them. With my work at the CBDC, these are conversations that I have every day. And what we need to think about is who's best to deal with the whole tariff and trade situation. Someone who's led 2 world banks, or a lifetime politician who's never had to make payroll. If we need to retaliate, we certainly will, and support affected workers with every dollar that comes in. This is exactly why I stepped up to run in this election, is because with my voice in Ottawa, small business owners will not be forgotten. As Canadians are buying local and building greater self-reliance, opening up markets for interprovincial trade isn't just overdue. It's a matter of economic opportunity that we've ignored for far too long. But here's the reality we need to confront. Eliminating all barriers without protections doesn't create freedom, it creates vulnerability. So I fiercely support efforts to increase interprovincial trade by reducing unnecessary barriers, but only, and I need to emphasize this, only implementing robust protections for small business owners. Because an economy that works for the few isn't unfair, it's unsustainable. We need an economy built for real people, where local businesses can thrive, and where economic power is grown throughout our communities.
Now we'll hear from Callaghan.
Hi. Our best answer is to support our local businesses and farmers. We must create more supports and help them build better systems as well. Give grants to local businesses and small business owners and help them so we can support them and invest in them, and we can be more self-sufficient as a nation, as well as a province and a community. That's the only way that we can build resilience against all the tariffs, strengthening our local community, our economies, so we never are at the mercy of foreign markets again.
Okay, so we'll now be moving on to the second question. Larry Duchesne will start with responding first. So our question is, with the rise of anti-2S LGBTQIA movements in the US, specific against transgendered individuals, how do you plan to support and protect the rights of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community?
Prejudice and actions against the community are becoming more common because of what's happening in the United States. We need government to provide protection, but we all, as citizens, need to side with them too. If you know members of the community, make sure you know that you're with them and they have your support, because they quite often feel alone. So the NDP has always been a very strong supporter and a recognizer of differences, and we will stand beside others and other genders in the community.
And now we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
My circle of friends, my chosen family, includes a number of people who would be considered perhaps non-traditional lifestyles, and my life is all the richer for having them in it. I'm a regular at Truro Pride events, and indeed, I recently attended the Trans Day of Visibility, along with my fellow candidate, Callaghan, and I was so pleased to see the numbers in attendance and the diversity in the group. I said there, and I'll state here, I support every person's right to express their gender identity in whatever way they choose. I see what's happening in the States, and it scares me, and it makes me think of that old quote from Pierre Trudeau, that the government does not belong in the bedrooms of the nation. It's so true. It is up to us to protect the rights of all citizens. Mark Carney includes everyone. Pierre Poilievre excludes. Not in my Canada. Send me to Ottawa and I will be the voice for all residents of Cumberland Colchester.
Now, Kellyanne Callaghan.
Every person in this country deserves to live safely, with dignity and love. But today we're seeing a rise in hate, in fear, in policies, the rhetoric meant to divide us. And that's why I'm standing here, the best ally I can be. To our 2S LGBTQIA plus community, I see you. I stand with you. You belong. The Green Party supports education that celebrates diversity, not hides it. We'll ensure hate crimes are investigated and prosecuted. And we'll put resources into the hands of queer-led organizations doing the work on the ground. This is about human rights, about freedom, about love. So let's be loud, let's be proud, and let's build a Canada where no one has to justify who they are just to be safe. Not now, not ever.
Yeah.
And now we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Ellis.
Thanks, Lexi. You know, it's unsettling to sit here and to be accused of someone who doesn't support the 2S LGBTQIA plus community. Why is it unsettling for me? Because it affects my family as much as it does any one of yours out there. And to have another candidate suggest that is more unsettling. To have them suggest that Pierre Poilievre, whether you like him or not, doesn't support that community is quite frankly untrue. Pierre Poilievre's father is gay. To continue the rhetoric of what we see in America and to have this type of communication here is disrespectful in my mind. We don't want to see what's happening in America come to Canada. We are not America. We're Canadians. We are not here to elect Mark Carney. We're not here to elect Pierre Poilievre. Your X on your box will not have either of those names in front of it. The Westminster style of government that we have means that one of the four of us will be your choice. We have the same vote as the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition when it comes to the House of Commons, and that means the commoners. That means all of us in this room. That is the system of government we have. Bringing American politics into this debate is utterly shameful, in my opinion. Here we are. We do not elect a Prime Minister. We elect who represents you in the House of Commons here in Canada. Canadians, and I've worked on this project with my friend Eric Duncan. We have been the champions of removing the gay blood ban. We are also going to be the champions of removing the gay organ ban. If you've had the opportunity to read the news, you know that today that's one of the headline stories. These are the things that matters to Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to remind the audience, as much as I love hearing your reactions, that we are holding all reactions until the end of the debate. So moving on to our third question, Alana Hirtle will be taking the first answer. And the question is, the federal government has put the brakes on immigration. They say this is because of the housing crisis, but the fact is that immigration has not positively impacted our GDP per capita. This suggests we are not bringing in the people with the skills we need to accelerate economic growth. But without immigration, Canada would have a negative population growth and our productivity will go even lower. What will your government do to ensure Canada has a sensible strategic immigration policy?
The success of the Canadian story is the diversity of those who call it home. We are a country of immigrants and are the stronger for it. We need to grow our communities, but in a way that we can handle. We can't ignore the fact that the largest generation in history has recently retired and left gaps in the labor pool. So we need to be intentional, strategic, and agile in our recruitment efforts, recruiting trade professionals, truck drivers, and medical professionals to fill the labor market gap. When immigration is done incorrectly, we have doctors driving cabs and university professors sweeping floors. The Liberal government believes that we should be working directly with the provinces to support such critical industries such as the fisheries, tourism, and agriculture, while making sure that these don't increase stresses on the housing and healthcare sectors. Many of my clients have had trouble filling job vacancies. The Liberal government will work with the premiers and municipalities to recruit pipe fitters, plumbers, carpenters, so that we can meet the needs of the most ambitious housing plan since World War II.
And now we'll hear from Kellyanne Callaghan.
Canada is a country built on immigration. It's who we are, it's our story, and I believe in that story. I believe in welcoming people who want to build a better life, just like so many of our families once did. But our housing system is under pressure, and we're all feeling it. It's not the newcomers who caused this crisis. It's decades of government of inaction. It's a system that allowed housing to become a commodity instead of a human right. And now people are struggling to find a place to live, whether they've been here for 5 generations or 5 weeks. So the solution isn't to close the door, it's to build a bigger house. We need immigration policies that are compassionate and coordinated, that mean planning growth with real investment in affordable housing, in infrastructure, in settlement services, so that every newcomer has a fair shot and every community has support to welcome them well. We can't pit people against each other. We fix this together or we don't fix it at all. The Green Party is ready to build not just homes, but a system that works. A system where housing is right, where immigrants are supported, and where communities are equipped to thrive. This is not about scarcity. It's about fairness and planning and having the courage to say, we can do better for everyone.
And now we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Ellis.
You know, immigration certainly has been a contentious issue in this country in the last decade, and I dare to say that Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who had a great hand in the failure that now exists. And sadly, this will continue if we elect another Liberal government. When you go around this riding and you speak to Canadians, not only Canadians who have had the opportunity to be born here, but people who have chosen to come to Canada and to Cumberland Colchester, people realize that the immigration system is failing. What do we need to do? We can't have more people coming here than have access to housing, who have jobs and who have access to services. That is the formula that will work. As we begin to look at difficulties, and my colleague mentioned healthcare, we know that at the current time there are 20,000 physicians in this country who do not work as physicians. We know there are 32,000 nurses in this country who do not have the opportunity to work as nurses. And having been the health critic for the last 2 years, that's given us the opportunity to create a plan around that. We know that those physicians and nurses and perhaps pharmacists and veterinarians need the opportunity to have their skills assessed by local experts, by local physicians, by local nurses, by local pharmacists, to have their competency assessed. That can be done very quickly. That will allow those folks to get into the job market as rapidly as possible, and will also then provide the services that are needed for the 6.5 to 7 million Canadians who at the current time do not have access to primary care. That is not a healthcare system. That is not an immigration system. Sadly, the Liberal government has had a decade to try to fix these things. And my friends, if you're better off after the last decade of either of those topics, healthcare or immigration, please feel free to mark your X.
And now we'll hear from Larry Duchesne.
We have population growth and we have a certain economic advantage because of immigration. Immigrants quite often these days are feeling blamed for the problems of housing. And to some extent, it's governments passing the blame on things that they should be doing themselves. If governments know a certain number of immigrants are going to come into the country, they have a responsibility to prepare for it. The immigrants are not responsible for the homelessness, for the lack of housing. Governments are responsible for not having things ready when they got here. As a richer country, we have a responsibility to the rest of the world to accept immigrants, not just who fit into our job structure and into our medical system, but just because they're poor and need a place to go. We have to start thinking more of we are a world community, not just Canada first, but we are citizens of the world.
Now for our fourth question, Kellyanne Callaghan will start. So the question is, Nova Scotians pay the highest taxes in Canada, but healthcare service standards don't seem to be as high as in wealthier parts of Canada. We all know healthcare service delivery is a provincial issue, but ensuring that the standard of healthcare is acceptable across the country should be a federal matter. What will your party do to ensure that Nova Scotians receive the same quality of healthcare as in other parts of Canada?
Thank you. Healthcare is one of the things that Canadians are most proud of, but right now it's not working for everyone. People are waiting months, sometimes years for care. Emergency rooms are overflowing, family doctors are disappearing, and millions still pay out of pocket for basics like prescription, dental work, and mental health support. That's not a universal healthcare system. That's a system cracking under pressure. The Green Party policies are to guarantee that every Canadian has access to primary care, to integrate mental health, dental care, and pharmacare fully into our public system, and to address healthcare worker shortages while reversing the trends towards privatized care. We'll stop treating health like a crisis and start treating it like a right, because healthcare is not just a budget line, it's your neighbor's cancer medication, it's your child's anxiety diagnosis. And sorry, and I'll stop there. Thanks.
So now we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Ellis.
Thank you very much. As I said, over the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to act as the health critic. And in that time, I've had the opportunity to speak to hundreds of stakeholders inside the healthcare community, to speak to provincial ministers of health across the country. And we are at a crisis. As I said previously, when 6.5 to 7 million Canadians do not have access to primary care, I hate to say it, but that means those folks have the worst healthcare system you could possibly imagine because they do not have access. How could that change? First and foremost, we know that there's a demand from healthcare providers across this country to have a system of national licensure. So if someone were licensed to be a physician here in Nova Scotia, they could practice anywhere in the country. The second thing, which I already alluded to, is understanding that international medical graduates are already here in this country. They have experience and they need to have their competency assessed quickly so that they can understand, do they have the language, culture, and professional abilities to provide services to probably many of you in this room. The second part of it that we need to be understanding, and I know that all of you in this room know somebody who has gone abroad to have their medical training, whether it be Ireland or the Caribbean. At the current time, there is no way for those folks to return to their home country and finish their training. That needs to change. And the final part is a bit complex, but when you look at it, we are in a crisis in healthcare, whether it be not enough pharmacists or not enough nurses or not enough physicians or not enough x-ray technicians. And when we are in a crisis, we need to very closely examine the amount of time it takes now to become one of those professions. When my wife went to pharmacy school, it was 4 years to become a pharmacist, and now it is 8. Those are the things that we need to look at. I've challenged the deans of the medical schools already to begin that process, and that is how we solve the crisis of healthcare that we have in this country.
And now we'll hear from Larry Duchesne.
Not an easy problem to solve for sure, but ultimately, government has to make the investments necessary to make sure that we have the healthcare personnel we need. I mean, look at the small country of Cuba. Cuba always has had enough healthcare people to look after its population and to share people with other countries in the world. So it can be done. It's a question of making the decision. The government is going to train the people needed, and we're going to do it here. It's wrong to go looking to the poor countries and saying, send us your doctors, because they obviously need them more than we do. So it's a home project that government needs to take on. Nurse practitioners too. We need to train more of them. That more nurse practitioners, they play an important role. And those who have a nurse practitioner instead of a doctor, the ones I know are quite happy with that arrangement.
And now we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
I expect all Canadians agree that innovation in healthcare is necessary. We had the largest healthcare deal in Canadian history reached between the Liberals and the provinces in 2023. This allows for the expansion of e-health records through all regions, landmark pharmacare deal for seniors, and dental coverage increasingly available across all age groups. We all recognize continued investment is needed. Prime Minister Mark Carney is committed to investing in Canada's healthcare. Pierre Poilievre has spent 9 years saying he wants to cut every program in healthcare and has only now changed his tune because he wants your vote. Regional concerns do need to be addressed. And Prime Minister Mark Carney will work with the premiers, building on the strength of relationship he has through healthcare as he has with the tariffs. As changes are made to these agreements, I will make sure that the concerns of rural Nova Scotians won't be left out of the conversation in Ottawa.
Okay, and for our fifth question of the night, Dr. Stephen Ellis will be responding first. So this question is, what are the two most significant actions your government will take to ensure disability inclusion is embedded in all economic development strategies, specifically by providing direct financial support, eliminating systemic barriers for entrepreneurs with disabilities, and guaranteeing full accessibility of business services, mentorship, mental health support, and full enforcement of accessibility laws?
That's a question.
Thanks very much, Lexi. You know, before I do that, I think it's important because healthcare is one of the most important aspects of things that we hear at doors of Canadians across this country, as I said in the last 2 years. I can't not address the misinformation provided by my colleague to suggest that the Conservative Party wants to cut programs of healthcare. Very early on in my tenure as the health critic, we agreed to continue the exact same funding for healthcare for the Canada Health Transfer as the Liberal Party did, which was a benchmark set by the Stephen Harper government many years ago. And that's been the standard here in this country for a long time. So to suggest that the Conservative Party wants to cut healthcare, again, I can't call it anything else but what it is. It's misinformation. There's been nothing out there that we have said. We have come out very clearly and said that anyone who currently has access to dental care will not lose their coverage. So as we look at the actual facts of the situation, to suggest, again, with someone sitting here who has been the health critic for 2 years, and to suggest that the party that I represent is going to cut health care, really is nothing but misinformation. You know, I think the other part about disability and inclusion that we need to get to in this country is that people need not measured by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I think that those opportunities we need to continue to offer Canadians, the Conservative Party, myself included, and I know everybody in this room. We don't care if your name is Matthew or Mohammed or Sarah or Samira. It doesn't matter where you came from. It matters what do you want to do in this country? How do you want to contribute to our economy? And how high do you want to raise the Canadian flag and defend the freedoms that we all have and the way of life that we have and that we cherish? That are the challenges of the divisive politics that has existed. And those are the things that we need to change.
Now we'll hear from Larry Duchesne.
Could I have the question repeated?
Yeah, we can repeat the question. So the question is, what are the two most significant actions your government will take to ensure disability inclusion is embedded in all economic development strategies, specifically by providing direct financial support, eliminating systemic barriers for entrepreneurs with disabilities, and guaranteeing full accessibility of business services, mentorship, mental health support, and enforcement of accessibility laws?
Yes, for sure. Part of what Jay Mead's been talking about is increasing assistance to for the disabled and seniors too. So that more money will help them, but of course, government needs to be supportive, and NDP has always been supportive of the disabled and will continue to be. And we were talking about healthcare and parties being maybe dropping Dentacare and Pharmacare. And the Conservatives candidate has said that he would maintain Pharmacare and Dentacare, but those programs call for expansion, not for maintenance. Dentacare this year is supposed to expand to include everybody earning under $90,000 a year. I wonder if maintenance will include expanding to cover what it was originally intended to do. And Pharmacare, we're just at the very beginning. There needs to be more investment in Pharmacare, and other provinces have to be brought in. I think Manitoba is the only province so far that has agreed to participate. So Dentacare and Pharmacare don't need to be maintained, they need to be greatly expanded.
And now we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
So I wonder when it became acceptable to not care about people, because DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The opposite of inclusion is exclusion. Does anybody in this room want to be excluded? Diversity for me is about hearing different life experiences and perspectives, like Jim, the dairy farmer out in Green Oaks, or Justin at the credit union in Amherst, or Claudio, the restaurant owner here in Truro. Pierre Poilievre sees or uses DEI to divide us. Nova Scotia, in this situation, is the equity-deserving community. Remember the lost decade under Harper? Atlantic Canada's emptied out of infrastructure funding, and every able-bodied person was told to go west to make their living. If there was more inclusion at the cabinet level at that time, perhaps Bill Casey wouldn't have been kicked out of the Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre doesn't listen to Nova Scotia. He didn't even stop here on his recent tour of Atlantic Canada. Send me to Ottawa, and I'll make sure that rural Nova Scotia is included in every conversation.
And now we'll hear from Callaghan.
I just want to point out that most of the answers we've heard are mostly with DI, which is important, but don't address disability directly. And I encourage everyone to look back at the video and review the answers. People with disabilities face unfair barriers every day. Government supports programs that don't provide enough money to live with dignity. People who are able to work have their government support clawed back. Housing is hard to find and afford. Workplaces refuse to make simple changes that would help. And I will help break down these barriers. I'll make sure that people with disabilities can fully take part in all areas of life. At the Green Party, our plan is to fix the disability tax credit so it's easier to apply and more people can get help. To fix and fully fund the Canadian disability benefit to lift people out of poverty. To enforce clear rules about supporting disabled workers and supporting independence and dignity. People with disability need more than just money. We'll help build affordable, accessible houses that work for everyone. We'll make sure that people can get healthcare and therapy that they need. We'll protect jobs and fair wages for disabled workers, and we'll also create a national fund to help people get important tools like wheelchairs and communication devices. Full participation for people with disabilities isn't optional, it's a right.
And now for our sixth question of the night, we'll start with Larry Duchesne. So the question is, Cumberland County has one of the highest child poverty rates in Nova Scotia, and poverty among working age adults was also significantly elevated. Colchester, while not the highest, still reports above average poverty levels in specific family and age groups. Given this, how will you, as a federal representative, ensure that federal anti-poverty strategies address the specific needs of rural communities like Colchester and Cumberland, especially single-parent families, young adults, and those living alone who face disproportionately high poverty rates?
Well, I'm a volunteer with the Oxford Food Bank, so I see the increasing need for food security. One of the solutions, and I think it, even some conservatives in the area came to agree during the pandemic, was when people got money, they used it to buy food, and use of the food bank declined. So what we need to start with is some form of guaranteed annual income. The argument that people will misuse the money has been proven wrong. And I think we really need to move in that direction. But we also have some employers who are not paying a high enough wage. We need a higher guaranteed annual income, a guaranteed income in the interim. A living wage, if possible. And where companies can't afford to pay a living wage, I think government have to step in and subsidize those companies, at least in the interim. And there's a lot of organizations working on the problem, but government have to get involved and make the big decisions to make the big difference. You've got to be guaranteed minimum income to start with.
Now we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
As Larry indicated, food insecurity is a major issue in this province, and that is directly correlated to poverty levels. This is a real problem in Nova Scotia, and indeed Nova Scotia is the worst of any province. And it's said that we only have a reliable 4-day source of food. I don't think it's unreasonable for people to have a reliable source of food to put on their table. I used to work with a gal whose husband was a lobster fisher, and even though he was a mate, after the boat was paid and the captain was paid and the money was paid out to the hands afterwards, there were months that they didn't have enough money to bring their own lunch. They made sure their kids were fed, but they would have to go without, and that is sad. For the past 10 years, the Liberal government has lifted more children out of poverty by expanding the child tax credit and implementing the National School Food Program, feeding over 400,000 students. Pierre Poilievre voted against feeding 400,000 hungry kids. Mark Carney will continue investments in programs combating food insecurity. And the best way to do this is through stable relationships with our trading partners to supply foods like leafy greens, 90% of which come from the US. There's nobody better prepared to deal with new trading partners than Mark Carney with his relationships on the world stage.
And now we'll hear from Callaghan.
Too many Canadians are struggling to care for their families. Parents can't afford childcare. Young people face huge student debts and high living costs. Working people can't get the time off to take care of sick family members, and seniors worry about paying their bills. The Green Party believes that caring for each other makes the whole society stronger. We'll make sure that everyone gets the support that they need. So our plan is to create universal early learning and childcare that every family can afford, expand paid leave to elder care, miscarriage, and other families' needs, make college and university free so students can learn without going into debt, and introduce a guaranteed livable income so no one lives in poverty. Quality care takes skilled workers and proper funding. We'll fund more child care centers with trained early childhood educators, and we'll help more people train as care workers. We'll support home care services for seniors, and we'll create intergenerational co-housing for elders and youth. And we'll make sure that family members who care for loved ones get both financial support and workplace protection. We're all better off when we take good care of each other.
And for our next question, Alana Hirtle will be the first one answering this. Yeah. Oh, you didn't answer it. You're right. I'm so sorry. I'm like checking things off as I go, and I accidentally put a cross on your name. I apologize. Go right ahead.
That's all good. Thank you very much. As I mentioned previously, we've knocked on thousands of doors in Cumberland, Colchester. And the very sad state of affairs here is cost of living is the number one issue. When you look across the country, most studies would suggest that many families have less than $200 left in their pocket at the end of the month. The sad thing is, when you ask folks the question at the door here, Most families do not have anything left at the end of the month. And that is a cost of living crisis. We know that the current decade of Liberal government has led to a $1.3 trillion debt. Cost of servicing that debt every week is $1 billion. $1 billion a week is $52 billion a year. That is more than our country spends on national defense. That is more than the federal government sends to provinces with respect to the Canada Health Transfer. This is unsustainable. We know that 2 million Canadians are visiting food banks in this country every year. We know that locally here in Truro, 1,600 unique individuals visit the food bank every single month. That's about 700 households. How do we change that? We know that this country has been blessed with significant natural resources. Do we need to get them out of the ground? Yes. Do we need to do it responsibly? Yes, we do. Of course we do. When you look at the wonderful things that can happen here, tidal power. Why is there no tidal power in Nova Scotia? Because the Department of Fisheries and Oceans refused to give a company called Sustainable Marine the direction on how to move forward, despite the fact that they were putting power back into the grid. Do we have opportunities for hydrogen in this country? Yes, we do. In this county, in both of the counties, yes, we do. We have some of the windiest places in this country. We have great sunshine, and those are opportunities that we need to have because a rising tide floats.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know I skipped you, but I gotta cut you off. So for our next question, now that all candidates have responded, Alana Hirtle will be the first one to respond. So this question is, how would your government work with the provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to address housing issues and create mechanisms that support Canadians across the entire housing continuum?
Thank you. This is a deeply personal question for me because, like many people in Cumberland Colchester, I rent my home. I don't own my own home. Housing is a generational issue and will require a generational response. The federal government got out of the housing market in the late 80s till 7 or 8 years ago. This is not a new issue. Housing prices doubled during the Harper Prime Minister years as well. The real issue here is supply. The Liberal government has already created the Housing Accelerator Fund. Prime Minister Mark Carney wants to expand it. Pierre Poilievre wants to cut it. The Liberals put a $1 billion water and sewer infrastructure program in place in late 2024, which supports municipalities on the front end to get home builders back to work. Mark Carney wants to invest. Pierre Poilievre wants to cut. Liberals propose to build 500,000 homes a year for the next 4 years. Mark Carney wants to invest in Canada, and Pierre Poilievre wants to cut.
Now we'll hear from Kellyanne Callaghan.
Everyone deserves a safe place to call home. In a country as prosperous as Canada, it is heartbreaking that so many families lack affordable housing or are one paycheck away from homelessness. I've met single parents who work 2 jobs yet still are struggling to keep a roof over their children's heads. I've talked to young people who wonder if they'll ever afford a home in the community that they love. I've been fighting for housing for years, raising funds for shelters, advocating at city councils, and even experiencing housing insecurity in my own life. Those experiences taught me a simple truth. Housing is a human right. We must treat homes as places for people, not as commodities for investors. That means standing up to those big corporations that buy up homes and leave them empty while families sleep in tents. It means pushing government to lead again in building homes people can actually afford. Together, we can end the housing crisis. We can build a vibrant communities where our kids and grandkids will all have a home. The Green Party has a plan to launch the largest affordable housing program in generations, create jobs, and hope is in the process. This is all about doing what's right and not leaving anyone behind. If we stand together and demand action, we will ensure that every Canadian has a safe and affordable place to call home.
And now, not skipping you this time, we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Ellis.
Thanks, Lexi. You know, it's interesting, once again, as you talk to the folks of Cumberland Colchester, you realize how dire the housing situation is. It's not a stretch to say that many young Canadians and young families are living in the basements of their parents. And that is not, again, consistent with the promise of Canada that I talked about earlier. There are several things that can be done very early by governments. Governments do not build houses. I think everybody here knows that. Builders build houses, not governments. But what governments can do is give folks a break on housing. We know that a conservative government would remove the sales tax on houses that are costing up to $1.3 million, which would be saving up to $65,000. We know that we will incentivize municipalities to permit the building of houses. Municipalities do not build houses either, but they issue the permits for the building of houses. We also know that development taxes for municipalities, they've increased those in the backs of folks who want to buy houses. The current deed transfer tax in the county of Colchester is 1.5% of the value of that house. What do you get for your 1.5%? But if we have a dollar for dollar cut of development taxes, that means that up to $25,000 per home will be back into the coffers of counties. And then they could use that money for the infrastructure that is very badly needed, because we know in places like Stewiacke right now that if people wanted to build more houses, which they do, that they cannot do it because the wastewater system is not able to handle more houses. So understanding how systems work is incredibly important. Governments do not build houses. Home builders do. They are working very hard out there right now. But also I would suggest to you that because of significant government regulation, many of them sadly are laying off workers.
Okay, and now we'll hear from Larry Duchesne.
And the NDP has proposed a plan to build 3 million affordable houses over the next 5 years. Quite an investment, quite a cost. But part of the funding would come from a victory bond, where think back to the Canada Savings Bonds of years ago. It's a great way for governments to make money, and that money would be all invested in infrastructure, including the increase in housing availability. The NDP plans for using Crown land to build smaller houses and prefabricated houses. And the public sector is very important in meeting the need. The private sector is part of it, but the public sector is very important, and I don't think all the other parties would agree with that. But I think our plan is a good plan, and it's better than the others have.
Well, it looks like we have time for one more question tonight, as per my official timekeeper. Thank you, Chelsea. So for our final question tonight, we will be starting with Kellyanne Callaghan. I'm sorry, I know you start first. So our final question is, Cumberland Colchester used to be a major agriculture center for Nova Scotia. We have a world-renowned agricultural school right here in Bible Hill, but agriculture seems to have been deprioritized since the 90s. In this new era of global food insecurity, tariffs, and soaring grocery prices, some people consider local food production just as high as a priority as healthcare. What will your party do to stimulate local food production and make farming viable and a viable profession again?
Thank you for the question. I just want to hop back and respond to some of the answers that happened on housing, because housing is where I feel most comfortable discussing deeply it. When someone says, like, cut the red tape or eliminate the development fees, and then complains about the sewage that we can't build in a specific community, where do you think we get the money to build the sewage? It's from the development fees. Prefab and my taking away HST is not enough if you can't afford a starter home. HST is not enough of a cut to cut out the missing middle. It's one very small step. And my last comment on the past answers is that prefabricated houses have always been more expensive than building them and supporting the communities here and the trades here to build houses here. onto farmers. Our farmers don't just grow food, they grow community, tradition, and resilience. But too many farmers are barely getting by, crushed by rising costs, broken trade rules, and the lack of support. And our grocery stores fully import from thousands of miles away. This has to change. As your MP, I will fight for food sovereignty, the right to grow, sell, and eat local food. The Green Party will invest in small and medium farms, protect supply management, and ensure local food is at the heart of school lunches, hospitals, and our everyday lives. Because when we support local farmers, we support our health. We protect the land, we build a future where our kids know where their food comes from. Let's bring farming back to the heart of our economy, where it belongs.
So now we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Ellis.
Thanks very much, Lexi. You know, over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to visit hundreds of farms across Cumberland, Colchester. And indeed, we are the farming capital of Nova Scotia here. Belly might argue with that, but not in my mind. One of the things when you actually speak to farmers, the first thing that they are going to say to you is the carbon tax is what is increasing the cost of food to individuals. That is the very first thing when you step on a farmer's farm that they say. How do I know? As I said, I've done that. I've talked to them. And that cost to them has to be passed on to the consumer. That they cannot absorb that cost. Their margins are not great enough to be able to do that. However, as all of you know, because I'm sure many of you have connections to farms, we have an optimism that exists inside the farming community. Because if you weren't an optimist, you would never become a farmer in the first part. The other thing that we know very clearly is supply management is essential for the continuation of farming inside of dairy, poultry, and ag here in Cumberland, Colchester. And whenever I've had the opportunity, which is multiple occasions at Parliament, I have voted for the supply management system to continue. We talked briefly in the question, I know it was a long question, but you talked briefly about the Agricultural College, and certainly the new leadership at the Agricultural College is incredibly important. Dr. Heather Bruce comes from a commercial background and knows very well the system and how to improve farming so that we know that it can continue to be a viable alternative as an agribusiness. And I think that's also incredibly important, that people begin to consider that this is a business and it's an incredibly important driver of our economy. As I said, whether it's dairy, whether it's poultry, whether it's eggs, blueberries, or Christmas trees, all of those parts of the economy are essential to maintaining our rural way of life, and we will continue to support them.
And now we'll hear from Larry Duchesne.
On the bright side, I see a lot of young people getting into farming in Cumberland County, and they seem to be able to make a go of it in trying circumstances, for sure. But the buy local program is really spreading across the country must be a bit of a boost for local farmers, because everybody I know is looking for products made in Nova Scotia, and that's not a bad thing. Farmers markets have been very successful in recent years in providing a market for local products, and governments need to invest in making sure that they do well and expand. There are other towns that can have farmers markets where they should be encouraged to be started up. In supply management, it's important as part of that system that when you buy eggs, when you buy milk, whenever possible, that it's made in Nova Scotia. Now, when you're talking about breaking down interprovincial barriers, that has to be done very carefully so that what's made here can be consumed here without a flood of foods coming in from even other provinces. So it's a little bit tricky when we get into supply management and local production. That's all.
And now we'll hear from Alana Hirtle.
So anyone who comes to the Truro Farmers Market on a Saturday morning will see me hanging out there most weeks. And it is not just a place to buy my vegetables, but it's a place of community building, and reconnecting with people. I'm so proud to see the Buy Canadian movement that has started in the last couple of months in response to what's happening in the US. And I love the fact that you can not just support your local farmers, but get out and build that community at the same time. In the grocery stores, you see the Canadian flags on items, and we should all be reading those labels and being much more attentive to those kind of things. As to the carbon tax, on Prime Minister Mark Carney's first day as Prime Minister, he got rid of that sucker. And I think everyone is quite happy to see the reduction in fuel prices. And that will in turn, of course, bring some costs down, which is a good thing. And Cody Boyce is the Minister for Agriculture in the riding next door in King's Hands. And we've been visiting some agriculture-related events lately. And I know that with he in King's Hands and myself in this riding, we will be able to bring a strong voice to Ottawa in support of farmers and agriculture and agri-food products here in Nova Scotia.
Okay, well, now we will. That wasn't English, but we will be moving on to our closing statements. So the closing statements will be happening in the opposite order of our opening statements. So we'll be starting with Kellyanne Callaghan.
Tonight, you've heard a lot of talk, more promises, more spin, more of the same. But here's the truth. If the Liberals and the Conservatives were going to fix affordability, they would have done it by now. Instead, prices keep going up, wages stay flat, and families in Cumberland and Colchester are stuck paying the price, while the same big corporations keep getting richer. I'm not here to defend the status quo. I'm here to challenge it. I'm here because I believe politics should be about people, not power. About solutions, not three-worded slogans, about action, not excuses. The Green Party has real plans to make life affordable again, starting with housing, food, and energy. We'll rein in corporate greed, invest in local communities, and give families breathing room that they've been waiting for. We won't play by Ottawa's broken rules, we'll change them. So if you're tired of empty promises, if you're tired of waiting for things to get better, if you're ready to vote for something and not just against someone, this is your moment. My name is Kellyanne Callaghan. I'm running for the Green Party in Cumberland, Colchester, and I'm ready to fight for you.
Thank you. So we'll now hear from Alana Hirtle for her closing statement.
Thank you. I want to thank each of you for making the commitment to come out tonight. I appreciate your active participation in our democracy, regardless of who ultimately gets your vote. To state the obvious, I'm not a career politician, but none of us up here are, and that's a good thing. We need more representatives who understand real life, the struggles, triumphs, and daily reality in Cumberland, Colchester. I've worked with small businesses here in Colchester County. I've seen firsthand what creates sustainable, local jobs that can survive economic ups and downs. I've experienced the late nights and tough decisions that keep businesses running and workers employed. That's knowledge that comes from living side by side with business leaders through tough times. Politics shouldn't be about scoring points with zingers and question period or social media. It's about solving real world problems with real-time solutions. I know the mental stress of tight finances. That feeling when you realize you can't seem to get ahead despite your best efforts. That knot in your stomach when a pet gets sick and you worry the vet bill will set you back for months. When I'm in Ottawa, that experience goes with me. Not political spin, not talking points, not privilege, but real understanding of middle-class life in today's economy. When Mark Carney announced that his decision to serve, I was genuinely excited. He brings extensive experience from public service and private business without holding elected office. This matters because our country needs more people who've worked in the real world. We face major challenges: inflation, a housing crisis, climate change, and of course, Trump's tariff roller coaster. These are big problems, and anyone selling you simple three-word solutions is clearly not serious about real-world problem solving. Mark Carney recognizes that these problems demand serious, strategic plans. He is committed to smart spending, not sweeping Elon Musk-style cuts. He is a team player, willing to work with premiers and global leaders to create new structures to ensure security during these turbulent times. I can promise you this: Every day I serve, I will fight for solutions that make real differences. I can promise you, I will listen. I will travel to any and every community hall and curling rink who will have me to listen and learn and ensure the realities of your lives are understood in Ottawa. I close with these two things I know for certain. If I'm given the chance to serve you in Ottawa, the people of Cumberland Colchester will always be heard loud and clear. And we will never be anyone's 51st state. Canada strong.
Thank you. And now we will hear Larry Duchesne's closing statement.
I felt myself in a fairly vulnerable position this evening, sitting beside a liberal and a conservative. I thought they were really going to go at each other, and I'd be able to call myself a rose between two thorns. However, they were pretty good and pretty calm, so I didn't get to say that. My best speech in this campaign was given this morning as I was walking with a neighbor's dog. I think the dog appreciated it. I hope so. I wish I had taped it and I could bring it to life. Every vote counts, and this is an election based on fear. And because of fear of Trump and the economic effect of it, people are thinking about voting strategically. And I see that when I'm out knocking on doors. I find some New Democrats who have decided that for this election, we'll vote Liberal. Well, I'm asking those New Democrats who are thinking that to come home. This is a very important party, a party that works to narrow the gap between rich and poor, a party that fights for the rights of working people, that was formed by working people, by Canadian labor, in cooperation with farmers and other social groups. So we are the party of workers, and we are also a party of the environment. So losses of votes in ridings are accepted. It means we're kind of starting over again. So I ask you to consider that when you plan your vote. This would not happen if we had proportional representation, where parties would be represented based on the vote they get. People wouldn't have to say, I have to vote outside of my party for another party. It wouldn't happen with proportional representation. And I think the country really has to move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now hear from Dr. Stephen Ellis, his closing statements.
Friends, I want to thank you for being here, and thank you to my colleagues who have had their say as well. Thank you for your keen attention. You know, this is a consequential election for many reasons. Some of them I have had the opportunity already to litigate in the House of Commons and in committee. Things like the opioid crisis that we realized has taken the lives of 22 Canadians every day. And almost 50,000 Canadians have died of opioid overdose. I had the opportunity to speak to incredible centers like the Bruce Oak Center, like the Village of Hope, who have proven outcomes that want to change the lives of folks who suffer with deadly addiction. I've had the opportunity to speak to many of you about the natural health products crisis, the crisis that the Liberal government wanted to take a world-renowned industry that is mainly led by women here in this country and basically kill it based on the amount of money that they wanted to charge to license products. We received more mail, more emails, more postcards, more letters, more phone calls about that particular issue than any other. And that is an issue that I went to bat and fought for day in and day out in the House of Commons and in the Health Committee. We talked about mammograms in the Health Committee as well. Based on bad science, the Canadian Preventive Task Force on Health wanted to continue to say that women didn't need to access mammograms until the age of 50. And we know very clearly from the newest and best science that's out there, much of it from Canadian scientists, that screening mammography needs to start at 40. And Mark Holland, the former health minister, had to walk back his statement and stop the work of the Canadian Preventive Task Force because of that science. I've had the opportunity to be in your businesses, to be in your homes, to be on farms, and to listen to your issues and to bring them to Ottawa. And for me, that's very important. Ottawa is not about putting Mark Carney's name on the ballot or Pierre Poilievre's name on the ballot. You can go and write that name on the ballot now if you want, and that will not count. All of you know that. This is about your leadership here at a local level. As I said previously, we all get one vote in the House of Commons, and that makes us different from our American neighbors. And that's a good thing, because that's a system that we all know and love. I've had the opportunity, as I said, to serve my country in the Royal Canadian Air Force as a family doctor, as a parliamentarian, as a husband to my wife, Deborah, as a father to my 3 children and my 2 grandchildren. And I'm proud of that. Your voice will be heard, it'll be respected, and will be voted on based on what you want in the House of Commons. Thank you.
Thank you. So now that the event is coming to an end, I want to make sure that we thank all of our candidates who attended tonight to take part in this very important debate and to give your time and participation. I'd also like to thank our audience for attending and staying engaged throughout the debate. Don't forget, Election Day is on Monday, April 28th. If you need information about voting or looking to register yourself as a voter, make sure to visit the Elections Canada website. If your question was not asked tonight, or if you're looking for more information regarding any of the candidates' policies, we recommend that you go directly to their office. On behalf of the Truro and Colchester Chamber of Commerce and our sponsor, the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, we thank you.